Welcome back to the Star Wars Canon Timeline podcast. I'm your host, Elysia, and we're back to continue our pre-Acolyte Star Wars coverage catch-up blitz. And this time we're adding a new voice to the mix. Welcome, Marcin.
Hello. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Today we're going to be getting into the Knights of the Old Republic games and the Old Republic MMO, and these are all still Legends properties, but these are games that people are still playing today, and the MMO is still getting updates. I think there's like 6 updates out now.
Yeah, probably.
And the Knights of the Old Republic remake, which, by the way, I'm going to start calling it KOTOR, just KOTOR, because that's far fewer syllables and people call it that.
Sure, on the same page here.
But yeah, there's been a remake long in the works, so we'll mention that a little bit later. And the new canon has already started making references to key characters like Darth Revan, so we expect more lore to be pulled over. Just a quick note for future listeners, we're recording this episode on May 10th, 2024. The content of this podcast was accurate on the date recorded to the best of our knowledge, but that might change as more content is released. We'll issue update episodes from time to time to cover anything that's been added to or changed in the timeline. And please do check out the quickie intro episode to the podcast if you haven't yet to learn how this all works in more detail. And also check out the previous Dawn of the Jedi episode for an overview of the first era of Star Wars history, and especially for context for this episode, the Old Republic overview, which sets the stage for the era in which the games we're talking about today take place. So, yeah, I'm here with Marcin, who's agreed to lend his Star Wars gaming expertise to our lore dive. Welcome and thank you. And yeah, you're one of my favorite people to chat Star Wars shows with, and just to share with the listeners, what is your Star Wars background?
Thanks, I'm honored. I mean, to be honest, I consider myself more of a casual gamer and Star Wars media enjoyer. I wouldn't really call myself an ultimate source of knowledge for any kind of Star Wars lore, but I guess I do have quite established opinions about different Star Wars shows and movies and different kind of media that I was exposed to. So my initial exposure to Star Wars started in the beginning of the 90s, I think, when I first saw reruns of the original trilogy on TV. That got me interested in the lore of the universe. And around the same time, I started my adventure of video games. And first video games that I remember being exposed to, first platform that I remember actually playing games on was NES, a Nintendo Entertainment System, and Super Mario Brothers. So I played it so much that I could actually beat the game in one sitting. And
how long? So, yes, do you remember? How long would that take?
About 4 hours, I think.
Okay.
Something like that. So it wasn't that long. I mean, not at least for 10-year-old me back then. So yes, I'm that old. I quickly transitioned to PC gaming and started exploring all the games that were available on that platform at the time. I was interested in, especially in first-person shooter games like Doom or Duke Nukem or Wolfenstein 3D. And it was around that time, it was after I saw the original trilogy of Star Wars on TV, when I heard about this game called Dark Forces, the first-person shooter game. And it's interesting because at the time, video gaming was at its infancy. So usually it was more about gameplay and graphics, which seemed mind-blowing at the time, rather than any kind of storytelling. So it was very refreshing to see a game that tried to show something in a much bigger world and with much more established characters. And I remember being very interested in that. And I guess starting from then, I discovered my love for storytelling in video games and mostly single player games. that I wanted to play at the time. So I don't remember if I actually managed to beat the game at the time because it seemed very hard.
With Dark Forces.
The Dark Forces, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember that it was very unique, and I was drawn to it mainly because of the storytelling and characters that it portrayed. So I guess that was probably my gateway
Yeah.
to the Star Wars, to this crossover between gaming and Star Wars
Mm-hmm.
that only grew bigger from then.
Just you've played a bunch of Star Wars games. Can you give us a quick rundown?
Yeah, so yeah, it started with Dark Forces, but then as I started progressing within gaming and started discovering different types of game and genres, it sort of evolved, and as the new Star Wars game came out, I became interested. I wanted to check it out. So sometime after the Dark Forces, I played X-Wing versus TIE Fighter, which I
Mm-hmm.
remember at the time required a joystick to play. The game wouldn't even start without joystick, having a
Okay.
joystick connected to your system.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I couldn't even justify playing, I mean, purchasing a joystick just for one
Right.
game for my PC. So thanks to my friend who was generous enough to just lend me a joystick at the time, I could
Yeah.
play and enjoy the game. So yeah, but after that, it was, I think, perhaps at the end of '90s, beginning of 2000s, when I remember playing Jedi Academy, which
Mm-hmm.
I thought at the time was an amazing upgrade over the Dark Forces, which, yeah, I thought was kind of like a natural progression, natural upgrade in graphics, in
Mm-hmm.
storytelling, in general game design. And I think that's when I started really getting into all the Star Wars games.
Right.
So soon after that, I got into Jedi Outcast, Star Wars Rebellion, Empire at War. So now we're moving more to strategy uh,
Mm-hmm.
type of gaming. Rebellion, I remember being particularly hard. I don't think I ever finished that game. I attempted several times, but it was a brutal strategy with a lot of multitasking and requiring a lot of forward planning. So but I still enjoyed it. It was an amazing game to play at the time. Empire at War, yeah, all the fans of real time strategy games heard about it for sure. It's being kept alive even now, and there's a dedicated community of players who are developing mods and allowing the game to be played
Oh,
online even
really? It's still going.
nowadays.
Okay.
Yeah. So even though there's no official support for it anymore, there are
Mm-hmm.
numerous updates and mods for it. So I guess there's also a big hope for kind of a remake or
Right.
some sort of interest from major publishers to capitalize on it, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
Um, then, yeah, I guess what I was very interested at the time was the Republic Commando, which I heard
Mm-hmm.
is actually contains everything that I mentioned before, which is great characters,
Mm-hmm.
storytelling, and amazing world building. What's even more interesting is that the game is focused on the Republic Commando. So the clones basically
Mm-hmm.
who I created for special tasks to provide the services for the Republic, or yeah, fulfill missions for the Republic and
Yeah, and in
for the
this
Old
case,
Republic.
yes. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I remember not being able to play the game because I didn't have Xbox, and it was an Xbox exclusive at the time. So I unfortunately I didn't get to enjoy it. Still hoping to do it maybe now. And then we quickly moved to the culture games. So the
Mm-hmm.
first Knights of the Old Republic, the original RPG game that came out, I remember it being an amazing experience and something that actually made me fall in love with video games that are set in the Star Wars universe.
Right.
Um, yeah, before that, I think my favorite genre of video games is RPG.
Mm-hmm.
In the
Me
meantime,
too.
yeah, during that evolution of getting into Star Wars games, I played obviously various different types of games. my love for RPG started with Fallout series. So
Okay.
especially Fallout 1 and 2.
Fallout could so be a planet in the Star Wars universe, but okay.
I suppose so. Yeah, yeah. It was a completely different world, which is yeah definitely something smaller compared to all the Star Wars
Right.
lore, but still it was I enjoyed the freedom that it came with,
Mhm.
and I remember being amazed at how free the game felt. Even we could actually attack anyone and kill any NPC and do whatever we wanted in the game. And it wouldn't really stop us from finishing the main storyline. We just had to
Right.
do it in a different way. So
Mhm.
it was a mind blowing approach to game design at the time, and
Right.
to how the story can be interactive in a way, which if you think about it, it's yeah, I mean, the game like that being released in the mid 90s, it's
Mhm.
still something amazing. So yeah, since then, since finishing Fallout 1 and 2, I never got to experience this kind of freedom
Mhm.
until the first KOTOR,
Right.
which yeah brings us into Star Wars.
Yeah. So then we're going to talk of course about the KOTOR games today. Have you played also the Old Republic MMO?
Yes, I started it. I didn't really play
Right.
a lot of it because, as I said, I'm more of a single player gamer. I don't really play a lot of MMOs.
Yeah.
I find them generally a little bit too confusing with all their options and all their,
Yeah.
in general,
Well,
quests
you and I are both
construction.
misanthropic. We're misanthropic gamers. You just like I'll
Yeah,
go on
yeah.
my
I
own
guess
quest, thank
maybe,
you. Me and
yeah,
my
maybe
NPCs.
I'm more of an introvert gamer. Yes,
Yeah.
I don't really need to connect with others. But yeah, I can get into it a little later.
Well, and also just to for everyone at home to clarify, all the games that you're talking about were released before that switch to the new canon. So this is all considered legends, what Marcin's been talking about. Um, and I know you've played a bunch of other games that are going to come up later in this podcast timeline, like the Force Unleashed games and
Yes.
Battlefront
Oh
and
yes, yes,
the Jedi
definitely. I mean,
games.
Force Unleashed. Yeah, it's perhaps not really considered to be the best Star Wars game, but
Well, but
yeah,
the character, right? I mean,
yes, the character and the storytelling was
mhm,
definitely great, and the whole media campaign at the time was very compelling, especially that it was exploring the power of the dark side, and
yeah,
and how the main character had those amazing abilities and could actually show them on in game and show the true power of the dark side. So that was something that was quite special at the time, and I remember being drawn into it so much that I even bought PS PlayStation 3 especially for that game, because it was not released on PC. It was only released later, so I really
right.
wanted to get my hands on it so much that I bought a PS3 for that.
And I'm sure to had much benefit of it for years later.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I definitely discovered a lot of amazing games.
Mhm.
Yeah, The Last of Us, wink, wink, for example. But yeah, that's definitely one of the first games that I wanted to play on PS3. And then Battlefront. Yeah, that's actually so. Yeah, that goes a little bit against what I said before, because that's practically the only MMO that I really enjoyed. But
Okay.
it's more of a shooter, so
Mhm.
it's not
That's
really a game
yeah.
uh, that requires a lot of time. It's easy to just jump into it and play a mission of more like a first person mission where you capture the flag or
Yeah.
try to gain advantage over the other team. So yeah, it was I found it fun. It was quite nice
Yeah.
to explore the
It's
game.
I mean, my idea of it as a shooter is honestly why I haven't given it a shot myself yet, but I do promise to at least try it out before we get to that point in the timeline. And
Before they
of
switch off the servers, perhaps.
but But of course, yeah, my favorite, well, some of my favorite games overall are the Jedi games, which obviously also come much later in the timeline. So I hope
Hmm.
that you will come back and talk, because you and you played before me, and so I'm like messaging you like I'm stuck on the stupid
Yeah, yeah,
slide
and
again.
me understanding the pain. Yes.
Oh.
Yeah. Yes, I mean definitely. That's yeah. These are the newest entries, the newest big games
Hmm.
in the Jedi Knight
And the
games.
storytelling again is just
Yes,
bravo, just
yes.
gorgeous.
Amazing characters, amazing storytelling, and
Hmm.
yeah, just in general, the true power of the dark side as well that can be
Yeah,
seen this time from the other side, not wielded by our own character, but by the
right.
characters that we are forced to fight against. So yeah,
Yeah.
these are definitely memorable moments.
Yeah, so guys, start playing, because then there's going to be full spoilers coming eventually.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But we're here today to talk about three games in particular in timeline order. Those are Star Wars, Knights of the Old Republic, Coder 2, the Sith Lords, and the confusingly named sequel, Star Wars, the Old Republic, which is set 300 years later, and that one's the MMO. And I do know the plots and a lot about the game mechanics of these games, but I've only played like little samples of each myself. So I'm glad we have Marcin here to speak from personal player experience.
Yes.
So the Knights of the Old Republic, this is, the one that started this whole thing. It's an RPG, first released in July of 2003 by BioWare, and it was originally an Xbox game, but now also available through platforms like Steam and on iOS and Android and blah blah blah. And yeah, it's especially loved for its writing and character development. Now, I also just have to note there is also an online series of miniatures called Coder Opportunities. We're not talking about that today, but if anyone has experience with this Opportunities game, I don't really know much about it, so I'd love to hear. Please check out the email in the episode notes. It's swtimelinepodcast@gmail.com. Wondering what it's like to play that game, and does it tie in well with the video games and comics? Because there are a bunch of the prequel comics. Have you read any of them? The Coder
Um,
comics?
to be honest, no,
No.
no. I'm more familiar with comics about Darth Vader. To be honest,
Right, right. The new ones, yeah.
yeah, the new ones. But yeah, from that time, I don't. No, I don't really.
No, yeah. I mean, so they had a series called Star Wars Tales of the Jedi first, and of course this is all legends. Basically everything we're talking about today is legends. I'll let you know what gets pulled over. And
Hmm?
so Tales of the Jedi was a collection of comics. It covered from about like 5,000 to about 4,000 just after BBY. And it was released in the 90s. And
Hmm.
so this was covering around something called the Great Sith War. But to be honest, like especially in Legends, there's just, yeah, four schisms and like at least how many Great Sith Wars anyway. It's just war over and over and over again. I think they might be simplifying that slightly for the new canon. But Coder basically takes place in the aftermath of this Great Sith War. And there's also a 50 issue Coder comic series, which covers like right up to the time of the game, just about, and even another one after that, 5-part sequel called Coder War. And yeah, none of this is canon, so we're not going to be covering it in depth. But if you want to check them out yourself, then yeah, please let us know what you think. But we're going to dive right into the game. So, Knights of the Old Republic is set in 3956 BBY. So, again, that's before the Battle of Yavin, basically before the original Star Wars movie. And the sequel is set 4 years later. So, again, this means the games take place nearly 4,000 years before the time of the original Star Wars films, and also thousands of years before the Acolyte. The opening crawl of the Kodor game is 4,000 years before the rise of the Galactic Empire, the Republic verges on collapse. Darth Malak, the last surviving apprentice of the Dark Lord Revan, has unleashed an invincible Sith armada upon an unsuspecting galaxy. Crushing all resistance, Malak's war of conquest has left the Jedi Order scattered and vulnerable as countless knights fall in battle and many more swear allegiance to the new Sith Master. In the skies above the outer rim world of Taris, A Jedi battle fleet engages the forces of Darth Malak in a desperate effort to halt the Sith's, I can say that, the Sith's galactic domination. Dun dun dun. So just to spoil, we're just going to spoil the whole game plot here. This is what we do. Just to run through it real quick. So it's an RPG, meaning you can play different ways as different characters, but the basic plot goes something like this. You wake up in a Jedi spaceship in the middle of battle with the help of Republic Jedi, Mandalorian droids, and some other companions, especially a pilot named Karth Onasi, aka Fleet. You escape the doomed ship and get caught up in quests maneuvering through Sith blockades, exploring ruins, and especially rescuing a powerful Jedi named Bastila Shan, who can sway the outcome of the war with her battle meditation talent. Along the way, you face slavers, racers, gang wars, and even a bounty hunter named Kang. You grow from simple soldier to a force wielding Jedi while unlocking the secrets of astronomy and exploring the galaxy. You'll, for example, get to know the Tatooine of yore, a desert planet that will come up again and again and again and again and again in canon stories. Star Wars storytelling probably spends more time on this planet than any other in the universe, by the way, even though it's supposed to be random remote in the Outer Rim. But this game is where Star Wars fans first met the Crate dragons, which is our sand dragons we'll talk about more. And you also hit up other top locations of Star Wars lore. So, like the jungle planet of Kashyyyk, where the Wookiees are from. Um, can you do a Wookiee impression, Marcin?
No. I, I don't know. Moi? I don't know.
I attempted one in the last episode. It was
Okay. Okay. Okay.
But if anyone at home can do a better one, as I said in the last episode, please send them my way. Email them. We're going to put together a compilation.
Oh,
All right. So the story continues. After sorting through tales of Wookiee betrayal and a mad Wookiee in the Shadowlands, visiting the Sith homeworld of Korriban, and searching other planets of all kinds to find Darth Malak and even his master, Darth Revan himself, you come to the game's pivotal confrontation with you. For it turns out, and I warned you about spoilers, y'all, you've been Darth Revan all along. Darth Revan all along. The Jedi and Bastila had your mind wiped, but now she's turned to the dark side. So it's up to you whether you will champion the side of the dark or the light in your final battles and ultimately destroy the Starforge or use it to construct your fleet to conquer the galaxy. Dun dun dun. So, Marcin, what were some of your most memorable moments in this game?
yeah, I mean it's such a huge game, and yeah, there's so many moments there. But I think, well, personally, I'm always an enjoyer of more of a darker themes in
Mm-hmm.
Star Wars. Perhaps, well, a little bit more mature, a bit more serious. I'll admit I'm always drawn to the dark side and to the power of the
Right.
dark side,
Mm,
unashamedly so.
one of us.
Um, so yeah, I mean, without a doubt, my most memorable moment is on Korriban,
Mm,
uh, the whole section of the game where we get to visit Korriban and we get to explore ancient Sith tombs, and we get to learn about the original Sith culture,
mm-hmm.
as a species, and how they viewed the Force, how they used the Force, and how it was eventually exploited by people who were also drawn to the dark side and learned from their culture on
Mm-hmm.
how to take advantage and how to subdue others, how to become the ultimate Sith Lord, if you will.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I remember it was very interesting to discover all that lore and how the dark side, or how users of the dark side evolved at the time, and how ancient it all was, and how much even older than all the Jedi orders, or let's say light side users. So, uh, yeah, the whole exploration of how of that background was very interesting. And the most memorable quest on Korriban was when we had to pass the final trials of the Sith Master Uther
Mm-hmm.
Win. Yeah, we had to pass all the trials in the tomb, in the final tomb. I remember that we, throughout our experience in the Sith school or Sith academy on Korriban, we could scheme against others, and we could lie to them. We could talk to other characters to
Mm-hmm.
undermine someone else. And
Right.
yeah, I remember it was that it truly felt like a real RPG, and how the dark side users would behave. So what was interesting is that we always had dialogue options that were truly evil and sinister,
Right.
and we could even sometimes attack whoever we wanted, even though maybe it was uncalled for, or if we felt like we were talking to a weaker character, we could just try to get rid of him. So at the final trial given by Uther Win, we had an option of aligning ourselves with a Twi'lek character. I forgot her name, but
Oh, was Mission Vow the street
maybe.
urchin, and she had her Wookiee companion Zalbar?
Mm, I'm not sure.
Okay.
It was not really part of our team. It
Oh,
was
okay.
she
Okay.
was one of the Sith apprentices,
Okay, never
and
mind.
I don't think she was meant to actually join us.
Hello, quick editor's note. Marcin looked this up after the recording, and her name is Euthura Ban. Okay, back to the conversation.
But we had an option of aligning with her just
Mm.
throughout the time of our time on Korriban. So I remember by following her suggestion, we had an option of actually working together and helping each other throughout the trial of Uther Win, against obviously the Sith rules and against his
Mm-hmm.
will, which I remember taking that option and working together with her to help each other in passing the trial. And at the end of it, obviously, our Sith Master knew about it all along.
Mm-hmm.
And at the final trial, our final passing of it,
Mm-hmm.
he showed up and revealed that he knew about the plan all along, and he gave us an option of punishing the Twi'lek for her wrongdoings, or
Mm-hmm.
or just dying ourselves together with her. And I remember having an option to choose between aligning with Uther Win or with the Twi'lek against Uther Win. And yeah, like a true Sith Lord or a true Sith Dark Force user, I decided to band together with the weaker character against
Mm-hmm.
the more powerful character to kill him,
Mm-hmm.
which turned out perfectly. But at the end of it, we also had another option of turning against Twi'lek and killing her, which yeah, I immediately jumped on this opportunity. And
All right, you do play much darker than me.
yes, yes. So in the end, after all this quest, I earned a lot of dark side points.
Right.
Kotor is a game that uses a morality system, where each action can earn us a dark or light side point. So whether it's a good deed, whether we are helping others and doing Jedi things, or we are doing bad things and well, just subduing others, killing others,
Mm-hmm.
it can earn us dark side points. So I remember at the end of this quest, I earned so many dark side points that when my character finally emerged from the final tomb, it really looked like Emperor Palpatine almost, with those eyes like
Right.
dark side Force user
Red
and
eyes.
covered
Yeah.
with red eyes and totally pale and covered in those weird blue veins. So yeah, it's just I remember being blown away how the game actually allowed me to be the worst
Right.
possible character, and to be the worst possible picture of Sith,
Right.
and yeah, managing to just rely on their own power, and not without any regard or empathy or help for others. And yeah, I mean, I truly felt like, yeah, I'm the Sith, and it's on one side I
And
was excited about the
Mhm.
choice, and about the freedom that I had. But on the other hand, I I had this final moment where I thought, what have I done?
What have I created?
What have I created? So yeah, the Anakin moment
Well, at
from
least
when
you got
Mace
to
Windu died.
keep your limbs and ability to walk out around an open air.
Yes, yes, yeah. Thanks
Um,
to my wits and yeah.
but the way that you align, it affects what abilities you can use, right? Like you have different access to different powers depending on if
Yes,
you're
yes. So,
light or
so the
dark.
morality system actually it's very interesting because it allows us to choose different force powers. So,
Mhm.
on the light side, obviously these are more defensive powers, um, which I admittedly haven't used that much. But on the dark side, it's obviously force lightning and force grip or force paralysis. I think so
Mhm.
yeah, there are those very offensive, very powerful abilities that can give us a huge advantage on the battlefield, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, not so much as a help for our characters in our team, or
Mhm.
so yeah, it depends. We're more empathetic and more character oriented and defensive on the light side, and very offensive on the dark side, which
Yeah.
actually fits very well.
No, that makes sense. And just to jump back to you were talking about a Twi'lek character, or I say Twi'lek. It's a debate. But
Yeah.
just since we haven't mentioned it on the podcast, for those who don't know, this is a common species. It's the type of species where they don't have hair on their heads. They have these like two fleshy appendages, which sounds worse than it looks. um, but popular characters like Hera are Twi'leks. Um, yeah. Anyway, we'll be definitely talking about more as they go on. But just so you know, that's a very common race. So the game uses a Wizards of the Coast D20 system, like D&D. Does it have that feeling?
Yes, yes, definitely. It's structured very similar to Baldur's Gate, to the original
Mm-hmm.
Baldur's Gate. Yeah, it's much. Yeah, it's developed much more because it's an older game, but it's a weird mix between live action and turn-based game because we can pause at any time we want.
Mm-hmm.
From what I remember, just by hitting space, we can just stop the game and assign all the queue of force powers or any
Mm-hmm.
kind of actions, offensive or defensive, to be performed by our character and by character in our party. So
Okay.
I think we can have up to 3 characters in our
Mm-hmm.
party in KOTOR, and yeah, we can choose whatever action available to any of the characters, and light them up, and just hit space again to just see it play out in real
Oh,
time.
cool. Oh, that's fun.
Yeah.
Um, and the characters are completely customizable, like in terms of character creation, right? Gender, blah blah blah, design. And you
Yes.
have 3 classes: Scout, Soldier, and Scoundrel, and later uh, 3 Jedi subclasses: Guardian, Sentinel, or Consular. Did you have any favorites amongst those?
Yeah. So in that system, in the Dungeons and Dragons system, my favorite characters are always magic wielding characters.
Yeah, me
Um,
too.
yeah, because I usually enjoy seeing all the magic effects and playing with them, seeing how we can interact with the world using that.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess force powers actually perfectly fit into that system. So my favorite was the Jedi Consular, because
Mm-hmm.
that's a character that specializes in force powers and force wielding. So
Yeah,
yeah, it was more of a stand back and cast spells character rather
right.
than get in the action and use the lightsaber.
That's how I play
So
games too. Like, stand over there and let me throw things at you.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's freedom of RPG games, especially party-based RPG
Yeah,
games, is that we can choose characters that are more offensive and will defend us, and we can
yeah.
just stand there a little bit in the back and use our powers to aid them.
And do you have a preference between the turn-based combat in this game or live combat like we see in the Jedi games later in the timeline?
Yeah, it's very different. It's obviously it's much less action oriented. I think for RPGs, I do prefer active pause
Mm,
option. Perhaps fully turn based. Yeah, it's okay, but I think I prefer the active pause
okay.
way
Yeah.
the most. I suppose it's more cinematic. It fits more with a game like KOTOR.
Right.
I think.
I mean, yeah, it makes it feel more lively. I have to say, like the Jedi games, it took me a little bit getting used to just how they actually you have to actually like you can't just mash buttons in that game basically.
Hmm.
And I was always used to growing up, I also grew up at the same time as you, and I liked RPGs, and I was used to RPGs as sort of like a strategy game. You think about, okay, if I'm
Yeah.
going into this combat, how am I going to stack the spells and use my items most efficiently? And that's not stuff that you can do when you're just
No,
trying to fight off.
no, yeah. The new Jedi games are more similar, definitely more similar to I would say Tomb Raider games,
Mm, mhm.
where it's just an action adventure game, and there's no time to stop the combat and strategize and think about what's going to happen and how we want to use our abilities. It's more about, yeah, we need to have a good control of our character, but at the same
Mhm.
time we need to think on our heels and react to what's happening in order
Yeah.
to progress through the game. So yeah, it's definitely a different approach. It's those games play much closer to the Force Unleashed games.
Mm.
Perhaps we are not as powerful as in the Force Unleashed, but it's more of an
Mhm.
action game in
Right.
that sense.
Right. You get to shove your lightsaber through people.
Yes, yes, and yeah.
Well, I like the force pulling. Anyway,
Oh,
uh, so we've been promised a remake of Knights of the Old Republic on for the PS5. For this game's been promised for a few years now, and they're kind of being coy about updates, but we've recently gotten some Saber Interactive, who took it over from Asper in 2022. They kind of gave a little snappy response recently, like, it's alive and well, we keep saying it's fine, just let us develop the game. Have you heard
yes.
anything?
Well, yeah. I mean, I've been following the news from the sidelines. I mean,
Hmm.
definitely, it's an exciting news and an exciting prospect. I definitely play the game if and when it comes out.
Hmm.
Well, it seems to be a time for remakes. There are a lot of
Right.
games that are remade, which some games that are not even that old, from perhaps 10 years ago, or maybe even not as old as that. So I think if there's any game that deserves to be remade and brought up to current standards of graphics and game design, it's this one.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, obviously it has to be done well.
Hmm.
If there are any changes or any updates, they need to work. So it's always a tricky situation where fans expect the best out of it and the
Right.
most, while resources are limited, and obviously maybe it's not always possible to make the game that's
Right.
perfect.
Well, I think it sounds like they're going for perfect. They know expectations are high. But I know these things take time, and I know that things have started to take longer time, especially since the pandemic. So I'm
Yeah,
patient, and
yeah,
if and when it does get released, Marcin, let's play it and then come back here and talk about it, even if it's
of
still
course.
Legends.
Yes, yes. I
Um,
mean,
I
let's give
mean,
them as
maybe,
much time as they need to.
yeah. Maybe it'll be canon, but no, probably. Even if it's still Legends, we're going to talk about it if it comes out. And also in April of 2019, Kathleen Kennedy, she's high up Lucasfilms. She was asked by MTV News about a potential Knights of the Old Republic adaptation, and she said that they were developing something to look at. No idea where things might fall. So it seems there's some other reports that they're sort of toying around with maybe making a movie or a TV adaptation of this, but that might have also fallen by the wayside, given that a lot of Star Wars plans in the past few years has fallen by the wayside. We'll see. It would be interesting. But yeah, this sequel film trilogy did reference Darth Revan. So he is officially canon, and we're just waiting for the canon version of his story. So that brings us to Knights of the Old Republic 2, which we're going to get into after a quick break. We'll be right back. Okay, welcome back. We're continuing our Old Republic games discussion with Knights of the Old Republic 2, The Sith Lords. And this was developed by Obsidian Entertainment. So this is a different studio from the first one, but BioWare did support them. Apparently, BioWare wanted to do more of their own IP games. So Obsidian was happy to license this, and they are known for one of the Fallout games, New Vegas, and also South Park: The Stick of Truth was a fun game that I played. The second game, it does get a little less attention than the first one, but it seems like people who have played it seem to love it even more than the first because of the storytelling. Like it's a game about broken people dealing with the ravages of war. What do you think, Marcin? Which story do you prefer?
Well, personally, to me, the first one was definitely much more memorable.
Okay.
But the second game has definitely has stronger characters, and influence of our character on them can be much stronger. So there's dialogue trees are much more broad, and we can sway characters to our own alignment. So that if we are more aligned with the dark side, we can actually talk our companions to the dark side
Right.
as well. So
So a new
it's
dynamic. Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely expanded much more, and I would say character relations are much bigger in the second game. Storytelling, yes, sadly, a lot of parts of this game were cut, so
Right.
it's quite obvious, especially towards the end. The story just follows very quickly, and it feels that there are a lot of scenes that were cut out,
Right.
just to bring us to the final boss fight and the final ending. But yeah, there are some
There's a restored
initiatives
content.
to
Yeah.
restore the content. Yeah, and I noticed even recently that on Steam, the version of the game is called restored content version 1 point something. So it
Right.
seems like it became an official Steam release with this content included. So I'm not sure how that worked out in the background, but yeah, I would definitely like to check it out.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah, I think that that was a fan led effort that they just did so well that just incorporated it to quote unquote fix the game.
Yeah.
Um, but just to set the stage, this is the story. So again, this game was released in 2004 in our timeline, but it's set in 3951 BBY and Star Wars years. Yeah, and again, you can totally customize your own character here, but you're not playing Revit again. This time, you're playing someone called the Exile. So this story starts 5 years after the climactic battle of the prior game, but now in a time of seeming relative peace, the Republic is quietly collapsing from within, unable to cope with the fallout of that prior devastating war. And it's your job to witness the scars of the galaxy and help it heal, sometimes revisiting planets from the first game, like the Jedi planet of Dantooine, sometimes exploring new ones. You are a former Jedi general kicked out of the Order for participating in the Mandalorian Wars and massacring millions of Mandalorians. After living in isolation for many years, self severed from the Force, you are pulled back into galactic politics and struggle when it is believed you are the last surviving Jedi of the 50-year Jedi Civil War, so called because to most of the galaxy, the Jedi and Sith are two sides of the same coins, quote unquote, squabbling over religion. Um, it turns out that the other surviving Jedi and Sith are in hiding and they're still fighting from the shadows. Now, along the way during the game, you encounter a colorful collection of companions, depending on your character alignment, including Mandalore himself, the leader of the Mandalorians, whose legacy plays an important role in later canon lore. And we obviously talked about him in the last episode. And you get closer and closer to a powerful triumvirate of Sith, But this trio's feeding off the Force to thrive, and that's leaving holes of cosmic destruction spreading across the galaxy, with the screams of the Force getting so loud that they threaten to deafen the Force altogether. And you can't let this happen. So you begin to hunt down the Jedi in their hiding spots to unite them against this catastrophic trio. And this new Jedi Council informs you that you haven't actually healed your connection to the Force. It's only through Force bonds that you have been able to wield other people's Force connections, and similar to the way that the Sith can use other people. So the Jedi Council wants to sever your connection to the Force until a mysterious Force user you know named Kreia intervenes. And surprise, she's part of the Sith triumvirate. But the other two, Nihilus and Scion, her apprentices, had betrayed and exiled her. So you are torn between Kreia's dark, mistrustful philosophies and the more wholesome collective healing ideas of light side users like Chodo Habat, a member of the snail like Ithorian race, who turns up regularly in this universe. By opening yourself up to your companions, exposing your pain to each other, you find many of them can also be open to the Force and trained as Jedi, and helping them heal of their disparate personal traumas helps you heal yourself. Or you can choose the dark side and follow the path of Darth Nihilus, sucking all hope out of the galaxy. Choose the side of the light, and it's up to you to rescue your companions, convincing Darth Scion to end his agony and embrace death, and battle Kreia, healing the source of the wounds echoing through the Force. Now, Martin, which side did you choose? Let me guess.
Well, no surprise here. Of course, is the power of the dark side.
So, how did the game end for you? It just like total
Uh,
devastation?
Although, yeah, I did play through this game twice. I
Mm-hmm.
remember, so just because to see two different endings, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so one ending is basically defeating Darth Nihilus and basically taking over his place
Mm-hmm.
as the ultimate Sith Lord, or yeah, defeating him and restoring order to the galaxy and restoring the balance to the Force.
Okay. Um, so the mechanics, I guess they're pretty similar to the first game, right? But with some
Uh,
improvements and
yes, we have some new abilities, some new Force powers. So yeah, natural progression of the RPG system, just like with RPGs that came up at the time in Dungeons and Dragons
mm-hmm.
systems, but obviously customized to Star Wars universe. So
Right,
more Force power oriented
right.
users.
And the graphics are look a bit improved, as one would guess.
Slightly improved, I
Mm-hmm.
think. Yeah, it's not a big difference, but I do remember that back at the time my PC suffered a little bit more from while
Okay.
playing that game compared to the
Yeah.
other ones. So some particle effects were improved, I think, and
Okay.
especially fog or mist effects
Mm-hmm.
were. I think perhaps I had to switch them off altogether because
Oh, yeah, to make
I
it run better. Yeah.
to make it run better. Yeah. So I remember some graphics were slightly improved, definitely.
Yeah, and there are highly customable lightsabers in this one.
Um,
Customizable.
yeah, I think definitely more colors and yeah, we could do dual wielding, or
Mm-hmm.
we could use the light staff as well.
But it sounds like the coolest new feature in the game is your ability to force bond, and how that like leads to your ability to influence how other players
Yes,
align, other NPCs alignments.
yes, that definitely stands out. It's a big improvement of the first game, and it's definitely draws from the mechanics of Baldur's Gate, where character interactions were one of the most important parts of the
Mm-hmm.
RPG system. And it's similar in this game where we have big influence on over other characters in our party,
Mm-hmm.
and we can in a way get judged for our actions as well. If we go too far from the character alignment,
Mm-hmm.
they'll start voicing their discontent at our actions.
Okay.
And it also depends what kind of character we have in our party while
Mm-hmm.
solving some quest.
Right.
We could get different character options, or say dialogue options, or different cutscenes depending of who's in our party. and if they actually disagree with our choices or not,
Right.
or if they just get along with it and continue with our own alignment. So
And if you're inconsistent in your alignments, I've heard characters react to that as well. Like if they think you're
it's
being
possible.
hypocritical.
I
Okay.
think I min maxed. So
Right.
I played, if I played Dark Side, I just played Dark
Right.
Side completely,
Yeah.
or I don't think I played more of a gray character.
Okay.
So yeah,
Yeah.
perhaps that's something that I still should do.
Yeah. And the game has Force Echoes in it.
Force Echoes.
Yeah. Like there are like we have in the Jedi games where you
Oh
have
yeah.
the psychometry and you
Um,
can
yes,
read an
recall
object.
certain. Yes,
Yeah.
but I'm not really sure if that's. I think that was somehow related to Kreia, and I think we could recall some memories by using her powers or by talking
Mm-hmm.
to her. At least as far as I remember, I'm not sure if we could use that on our own completely.
Yeah.
Um, or perhaps she gave us this kind of power somewhere throughout down the line of progression of the game. So
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, and it's with Kreia that you form a sort of force dyad, which is something that Bob and I talked about in the last episode. Yeah, I think it's Kreia's an interesting one because she has a complex reason for being a dark side user. Like she's just basically too. She's not evil as much as too independent. Is that the vibe you get?
yeah. Well, I always remembered her as more of a gray character.
Mm-hmm.
She was always very careful about what she revealed to us, and I remember dialogue with her was never obvious.
Okay.
So compared to me, who always chose either the worst dialogue option or the best dialogue option, let's
Right.
say, well, the more dark side or light side
Mm-hmm.
dialogue option, she was always more gray and much more careful in her responses to us, at least from
Right.
what I remember. So she would never really disagree or disapprove or approve of those extremes that I was throwing at her.
Right.
Um, yeah. So I think at the end of the game, it was possible to actually influence her and make her
Okay.
see the light side or the dark side,
Okay.
if I remember well.
Yeah.
Depending of how what was our final alignment. So it's possible that well, one could consider it as if we actually stayed more in a gray side, we could see that as her influencing us and just following her neither here nor there
Yeah.
alignment.
Yeah, and her students turned, nemesis are pretty iconic. So we've got the demon-like Darth Nihilus, who's aptly named, and I feel
Yes,
like people still talk about Darth Sion a lot, who's a one-eyed mass of twisted flesh too angry to die, which is literally
yes.
his lore. Like he just will not let his body fall apart and die.
He's just held together by sheer strength of the force.
Of hate. Yeah.
Of hate. So yeah, I guess Darth Vader has nothing
Yeah.
has nothing against him.
And there was a third game planned, but it was canceled in 2005 because LucasArts was running short on funds around that time. But the story was adapted to a tie-in novel, Star Wars: The Old Republic, which is also, of course, Legends continuity, not canon. So, if you are interested in more of this story, then definitely read that Old Republic book series. That's also covered on the Legends Lounge podcast that I mentioned last time. So Revan still, like I said, confirmed in canon, definitely one of the most iconic figures from Legends. One of the most powerful Sith or Jedi to ever live. I don't know if they're going to tone him down in canon, but in Legends, Darth Bane, who we talked about last time, based his rule of two on Revan's teachings. So he's super important in like what the Sith become later. And I forgot a fun fact about Darth Bane. Did you know this, Marcin, that Darth Bane is named Bane? He chose the name Bane because when he was a child, his father used to say he was the bane of his existence.
I think I remember reading about that. Or yeah,
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 daddy issues.
yeah.
Um, but we also have, yeah, Revan and Malik are an iconic duo. They were kind of besties who were turned against each other by both Sith and Jedi, because the Jedi were doing some messed up mind control stuff in there too. And yeah, Revan, he ultimately regrets taking his friend's jaw and then later his life. And but Revan had serious beef with the Mandalorians, so he defeated Mandalore in single combat in Legends, and he wore the helmet from a fallen Mandalorian, which he swore not to take off until they were defeated. So he was really, but the Mandalorians very much respected him. And in the Legends follow up book that's with his name, it's set after these games. He and Bastilla are together and have a kid. And the exile from the second game, we find out, was once a subordinate of Revan. And the two team up with Darth Scourge to take out the corrupt Sith Emperor Tenebrae. But Scourge has a vision that a different Jedi is going to be the one to kill Tenebrae. So he's like, "Ooh, bad situation." And he turns on his allies to get closer to the Emperor. And Revan ends up in sort of a stasis drawn for like 300 years. He's just he's pulled out sometimes to torture him from information and then put back in. And but he's this whole time using his talents to subtly impose his will on the emperor, so like you do in the second game a little bit, to slow down the emperor's invasion plans. And Bastilla, we see his wife left behind with her son, tells her son that she knows Revan must have succeeded in his quest, though he never returned because the invasion he foresaw never came. So kind of a fucked up ending, but appropriate for Star Wars, I think. But then, yeah, getting into the plot of the Star Wars Old Republic MMO game, after 300 years, Revan is freed by Republic forces and then killed by Sith Imperials. But his mind is so splintered from those centuries of torture that his soul splits in two. We've got the light Revan and the dark Revan. And dark Revan, his will is so strong that he wills himself back to life, and he learns that someone has killed the Sith Emperor that he wanted to kill. So he decides what's probably a good idea in this case is to bring the Sith Emperor's soul back, his spirit back, so that he can completely destroy it. And thus all of his influence. And others are like, oh, cool, dude. Yeah, let's bring back the guy we just killed. So the Republic ends up teaming up with the Sith Empire to stop him. And the person who, one of the people who killed the emperor, and one of the people who ends up taking out Revan, is his own granddaughter, Satil Shen. And she is also famous in Legends for having given up her own son so that he couldn't be used against her, though she named him and he helped her later, but whatever. But she ends up teaming up with Darth Mar to defeat Revan on Yavin 4. So, yes, the moon after which BBY is named. Ultimately, disheartened by all the loss, she and her ghosty new bestie Mar go into a meditative exile together, which is, I'm taking as a euphemism. So yeah, this story is from the Revan book and comics, and this Star Wars: The Old Republic game, which is an MMO BioWare first released in December 2011. Apparently, one of the most expensive games ever made at the time. And did you play it when it came out, Martin?
Yeah, I played for a little bit when it came out, but as I said, I was put off by all the mechanics of a
Mm-hmm.
typical MMO game. Especially quest structure was a little bit generic. It just it consisted of a lot of quests that asked us to go there and pick up those 10 plants, or go
Right.
somewhere else and kill 10 of those beasts, and come back to the giver of the quest. So yeah, I stopped playing it after a while, and I kind of got back to it not that long ago. I think perhaps maybe last year, a couple of months
Mm-hmm.
ago. And well, while I do appreciate all the work that they've done in the
Mm-hmm.
meantime, it still feels a little bit dated. It's more than 10 years old now,
Yeah.
and it's not really, I would say, up to the standard. I mean, it's still the old mechanics of fighting and it just feels much more like a World of Warcraft type of
Right. Well, yeah.
RPG MMO rather
Mhm.
than something a little bit more modern. So what I do appreciate about the game is that it has its branching introductions, so
Mhm.
depending of which character we choose in the beginning, which character alignment and class we
Mhm.
choose when starting the game, it throws us in different scenarios, in different starting settings. So if we choose to be Sith, we actually start in Korriban, which
Mhm.
I thought is very interesting, and
Yeah.
that's the only starting point that I played through.
Mm.
I didn't really finish it, I do admit, but
Mhm.
yeah, I did enjoy coming back to Korriban and revisiting the tombs
Right.
that I've seen
From
all
KOTOR,
those
yeah.
years later. Yes, so
Yeah. 300
that
years later.
was yes. Well, in our timeline, it is much less, but um, yeah. So that's definitely something I enjoyed, and even for a brief moment, yeah, it's character progression and character development is definitely much expanded, and
Hmm.
we have a lot more force powers available to us, and
Right.
character progression is quite detailed, and we can also customize it completely the way we want. So we can choose different races, we
Mhm.
can choose different body types or
Right.
faces, or yeah. So it's very customizable, and that's definitely something that's built upon previous games.
Yeah. Yeah, so the last update was in 2022, but I guess that would be an expansion pack, so maybe you have to get to the end of the game to get that new content or get past the
Oh,
other.
yeah, yeah. I never got that far.
Mhm.
I mean, they do release some smaller updates in the meantime,
Yeah,
but these are more like bug fixes
right.
and
But the
perhaps
last
maybe
big
minor.
story the last big
Yes.
story update was 2022.
Yep.
So this one it's set in 3626 to 2643 BBY, so it covers like basically almost a century, like 80 years worth of time by now. And the Sith Empire has reemerged, but it's recently made a tenuous peace with the Galactic Republic, which is the Old Republic. And if you're interested in the story, you know, in addition to obviously the game, there's tie-in comics and books that fill in more of the story before and after. But yeah, it's still being played and updated, and apparently it was closing in on 1 billion in lifetime revenue in 2019 on a 200 million development budget. So I guess they're making it worthwhile. They are getting the most out of this game.
Yes.
And you got a 3-act storyline that in yeah, like Marcin said, it varies depending on which of the 8 game classes you've chosen. This yeah, it's another galactic war setting, of course. This time it's the 28-year Great Galactic War, which has wrecked the galaxy, and the Jedi are being blamed. So the Order leaves capital planet Coruscant to return to the planet where the Order was founded in Legends again, Tython, and while the Sith once again control their home planet of Korriban. And depending on which faction and class you choose, yeah, you'll cross paths with different live players and in-game characters like smugglers and a plethora of Jedi and all the sorts of Star Wars stuff you'd expect. Um, do you have any moments you remember of the story side of things from this game?
No, not as much. Yeah,
Yeah.
as I said, the beginning and all the scheming that you can do on Caravan is still there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's definitely apart from those rather boring quests of just doing 10 of something and coming back to the giver of the quest. We do have the option of lying and scheming and
Okay.
playing out the proper RPG
Mm-hmm.
character as a Sith would, or let's say a
Yeah.
proper dark side character would. What I find very interesting is that previous games actually kind of funneled us towards force usage, while for example in the first KOTOR game we started as a different class because
Mm-hmm.
obviously we we didn't have prior memory of who we were
Yeah.
as Revan.
Mm-hmm.
So we could start as a soldier or as a pilot
Right.
or smuggler, we eventually, as we progressed through the story, we had to choose the Jedi alignment that we
Mm-hmm.
kind of discovered again
Right.
into our Force connection. While in Culture MMO, we can actually be a bounty hunter or
Right.
a smuggler or agent, and we don't really need to be a Force wielder. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, yeah, that's what everybody wants to be eventually, but yeah,
Hey, a
we
lot of
don't
people
have
like to
to.
play rogues. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's interesting. Yeah, being a bounty hunter and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, perhaps aligning or joining with some Force users in our party, but playing
Yeah.
as a fully as some other iconic character
Mm-hmm.
type that we got to know from all the Star Wars movies and other media. I think that's very interesting. As I said, I never really got that far, but yeah, I think it's a very interesting option and probably something that is very appealing to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Hence immense popularity and the money that involved in it,
Yeah.
as you mentioned.
I think one thing that I noticed is obviously the graphics are better than the Kotor games because it's newer. Um, but the design, considering these games are supposed to be 300 years apart, it just strikes me how everything looks the same and it looks the same like it looks in the main movies and everything. So I do have to compliment the new canon. One thing that they are doing well, especially now that we see the High Republic, which is after what we're talking about now, we see that there's a distinctive look there. And we see with the Acolyte that there's a progression from that like white and gold High Republic look to the more brown monk Jedi look. So I have to wonder when the canon side gets to, remakes the Old Republic stuff in canon, what things will look like if they're going to extrapolate that backward even more. And yeah, I'm
Yeah.
very
Well, I do find while the graphics are improved, I do find them a little bit more cartoonish, to be honest.
okay.
The original Culture games were still quite darker in their design, even though graphics are more simple. It had those darker tones in it, especially the second games. I think
Yeah.
there was a little bit more mystery. The Kotor MMO feels, to me, it feels a little bit more cartoonish. The colors are popping much more, and
Mhm.
it's not. Perhaps I didn't get to some parts of the game that are maybe more terrifying
Right.
or but yeah, it has a different atmosphere. So yeah, perhaps that's one of the points that also made me not really
Yeah.
get too much into it.
Yeah, it's a free to play game, which sometimes I find frustrating because then, to progress more quickly, they want money and then I just want to.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, it breaks the immersion having all those MMO options in the menu.
Mhm.
The game bugs you constantly to purchase more points, to purchase more credits, and they try to tie it in within the lore and within the game universe, but
Right.
still,
Okay.
it just feels a little bit too artificial.
Right.
So yeah, it breaks the immersion in
Yeah.
my opinion a little bit. Although yeah, admittedly, that's the only way to design such a big game and allow it to be played by so many people. It has
Yeah.
to be based on some live events or some things that are time based.
Right.
So
To get people at the same
to
time.
get,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it does sound like it's got a cool amount of customization. So the 8 different classes are on the Sith side or on the dark side. It's Bounty Hunter, Sith Warrior, Imperial Agent, and Sith Inquisitor. Or on the Galactic Republic side, it's Trooper, Smuggler, Jedi Knight, or Jedi Counselor. So did you go for Sith Inquisitor or Sith Warrior?
Inquisitor, of course.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, and all the powers that come with it, dark side powers.
Yeah.
Um,
And you can choose different races. Which race did you choose?
yeah, I'm pretty sure I chose the Darth Maul race,
Oh,
whatever
the
that's.
Zabrix. Yeah.
Yes, yes, exactly.
Mm.
You know, because
And
somehow it felt fitting.
yeah. And your character has a voice? Because usually when you play these kinds of games, like the NPCs can have voices, but then you just see text for your own character. But in this case, the character is voiced?
So if I remember well, your character has voice, but only in certain dialogue, only in the dialogue, main dialogue choices that are progressing the main story.
Okay.
I think all the smaller quests, we just simply
Right.
click on
Okay.
the right option, and that's it, and
Okay.
we just get a response from the other
Yeah. Because that would be a
from the
lot.
other character. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think I'm not even sure if it existed in the beginning. Perhaps they introduced it later
Okay.
in some other updates of the game, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's only those main story points where it's a
Yeah.
little bit more interactive like that. Otherwise,
And you can
yeah.
romance your NPCs. That's very Baldur's Gate.
Uh, I
Your
believe so.
companions.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm normally, yeah, I normally stay away from that.
Yeah.
Somehow, yeah, I'm more into just the power of the dark side, and
Right.
not
Fair.
really not really bonding with others that much. But yeah, I think it's definitely an option there as
I
well.
I'm definitely a romancer. Like in Baldur's Gate, me and Shadowheart are together forever.
Well, I mean, hey, it's an RPG game, and the more
No.
options, the better.
Yeah. No, it's good
Obviously,
that when it allows you to play different ways. The thing about MMOs is indeed you need to coordinate with other live people for these raids, which is great
exactly.
if you have like a regular group that you do this with as a social activity, but it can be kind of annoying if you're like, I just like to play this game sometimes when I have free time, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And have your social fix outside of gaming,
Yeah.
perhaps.
Yeah. But you get to visit 17 different planets, including a lot of like really important ones in the Star Wars universe. So that's cool. And space combat's always cool. But yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and guess that of the three games, the first KOTOR is your favorite.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I feel that is the best established game in terms of how well rounded it is, how well
Hmm.
designed it is. Yeah, and those memorable moments, especially the twist in the middle
Right.
where we discover that we are actually Darth
Revan.
Revan,
Yeah.
and in my example, I actually played as the dark side, and I gained so many dark side points that it's actually very clever in the middle of the game how our character is revealed, and when he takes off his mask, we see actually our face behind
Hmm.
the mask. But it's some flashback from the time when we still had our memory,
Hmm.
and we actually see our face the way how it is, how it portrays our progression through the game
Okay.
at that moment. So I
So
I,
you
I
had
was
your
so
veiny.
I had my veiny Palpatine look,
Yeah.
and it fit perfectly well because Revan was on the dark side at
Right.
the time. So I was even more blown away by how well it was all tied together. That they actually used the model of a character the way how it looks like
Right.
in our game. Not
Hmm.
that it was a cutscene or CGI cutscene that was predefined. So it was a very clever idea that obviously worked for someone who played on the light side as well. Because, well, I mean, okay, Revan could use his force to make himself look nice, or I don't know, could use some sort of illusion to hide his dark side looks. But
Hmm.
yeah, I think that was definitely a clever
Right.
thing, and one of the best twists ever, I think,
Yeah.
or at least that's how I remember it.
No,
Perhaps,
yeah. I mean, I think
yeah,
it's generally remembered as such. It's yeah, it's one of the
in
reasons
in
why
any kind of media,
yeah.
yeah,
That's one of the reasons why people are still playing this very dated game
yeah, yeah.
in
So
terms of
we're all
graphics.
spoiling it,
Yeah.
unfortunately, but yeah,
Well, yeah. I mean, we warned you up front.
exactly. So
um so would you say is KOTOR your favorite Star Wars game overall or is there another one that's taken the cake?
yeah, it's a very hard choice. Yeah, I would say in terms of RPGs, it's probably my favorite RPG game.
Okay.
Is it my favorite Star Wars game? It's definitely high up there. Yeah, I mean RPG games are among my favorites, so
Yeah.
I tend to agree. But yeah,
What are the other top contenders?
um, I would say Jedi games. Yeah, the more
Mm.
recent Jedi
Mm-hmm.
games, and perhaps the first Force Unleashed.
Right. Okay.
It was not a perfect game by any means, but it actually made us feel it did a great job portraying the dark side and the power of the dark side and what truly character strong in the dark side can do within that universe. So it actually it was more of an action oriented game and easier and not so choice based, but it's nevertheless it actually did a great job in what it set out to do, I think.
Okay. Well, if anyone is, after hearing us talk about them, interested in these games, don't worry. We might have spoiled the biggest twist, but we definitely didn't spoil all the details. It's still worth playing.
Oh no,
Uh,
these are
yeah.
such massive games that they're still worth playing.
Well, thank you, Marcin, for being here to talk through your experiences with them. I hope that you'll be back to talk about more major Star Wars games and maybe even some films and TV shows in the future.
Sure, why not?
And for listeners, the next episode for now is, if you're listening around the time of release, is Bob and I will be back with an overview of Era 3, the High Republic. And then after that, we're going to sneak in a quick look on the upcoming Eclipse game. And I think Martin's going to drop in with his opinion on the Eclipse game as well, of what we know. So we'll tell you, it's not a game that's out, but it's a game I'm very excited about. Um, but yeah, we're zipping through these early eras, and then we'll be again looping back in to fill in this part of the timeline. It's more content is added in canon, backdating episodes, so the timeline is always a quick reference for you, and new listeners can listen to it all in order. But we will be lingering in this third High Republic era a little longer than the first two. First, Bob and I will help you get prepped for the new series, The Acolyte, which starts June 4th already, with that overview of the current High Republic canon, and we're going to keep it a high level overview. We're going to come back and talk about the books later, but we will be paying special attention to characters or concepts that are likely to be important for the Acolyte TV series. Yeah, I suspect the Acolyte's going to trigger more people to want to read the High Republic series of books. Do you have any interest in them, Martin?
In the books,
Yeah, the High Republic
yeah,
books. Yeah.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people love these books, and of course it's a mixed bag. There's a bunch of books, some are better than others, but people are really loving them, and I think that's the reading is going to spread with the show coming out.
Hmm.
um but then, yeah, after that, we're gonna take a look at season one of Young Jedi Adventures, which is a show for preschoolers, but it's adorable and it's set in the High Republic. So we're covering it. We're gonna talk about the main characters, some world building elements, and if you want to watch along or just get a little taste of the show, then start with the shorts, which are in a separate bin on Disney Plus. So you'll find the show, and then you'll find separately the Young Jedi Adventures shorts. And we're also got a new voice on that episode checking in, Hjalte, who's not only the parent of a young child, but a professional animator and someone Marcin and I know in real life. Um, and after that, it's time for the main event of this era for now, which is the Acolyte. And John from the Lorehounds and I are going to be doing weekly scene by scene episode breakdowns, with Bob checking in to talk lore references. And we're going to do that cross coverage with the Lorehounds feed. So, yeah, Martin, thank you for joining me to talk Coder today. I'm looking forward to talking more Star Wars games. This episode's been produced by me, published by the Lorehounds. More Lorehounds content. Watch out for the Bad Batch finale and Tales of the Empire, an episode that should be coming out probably just before this one did, but that'll be on the Lorehounds feed. And also coming up is Doctor Who coverage, X-Men 97, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. That's all stuff that I'm doing, but also House of the Dragon fans should check in. They're recapping season 1 right now to get ready for season 2. And on our affiliates, Radioactive Ramblings is currently covering Invincible Season 2. Rings and Rituals is wrapping up their recap of Season 1 of Rings of Power. Properly Howard is finishing off their Felonies and Fugazi season. And you'll find a Lorehounds link in the show notes with links to all these podcasts where you can subscribe on your platform of choice. For those of you listening live, see you again later this week in the High Republic.